Hi everyone, we're at the point of the semester when you are reading a lot of your free choice books, and so I wanted to give you some recommendations on some chapter books that you should be adding to your list of free choices. I'm glad that a lot of you are not choosing just picture books for your free choices, but you're taking the time to choose a few children's books that are novels. Here are some recommendations I have of chapter books that I like, book sets that I buy an entire class set of to read with a classroom, and also a series of books that are great to get kids hooked on reading. So the first one is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. It won the Newbery, and it's something I buy a class set of to use in upper grades. It's a great mystery where you have to figure out who would win $200 million by solving a mystery in order to get money from someone's will. It's got a lot of twists and turns, and it's really fun. Here's another one that won the Newbery, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, used in upper grades. It's got a lot of great discussion points about civil rights and persecution. I usually have a class set of that book as well. It's by Mildred Taylor. I have a class set of this from the Mixed-Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. It won the Newbery, about two kids who run away and live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and how they survive for a while living in a museum. There's also a side plot going on about Michelangelo, and so usually I have the kids get under their desks and paint the bottom of their desks a paper that's taped up there so that they feel like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. We've already read this one, but this is another one I usually have a class set of because it's a great read as a whole class. I especially like the suspense that each chapter has a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter. This is another one I buy a class set of, Richard Peck, A Long Way from Chicago. It won the Newbery. I think it was an honor book that year, and it's got some really colorful characters. This one gets a lot of controversial reactions, a series of unfortunate events, but it definitely is one to get kids hooked on a series, and it's supposed to. The thing about this book that's sometimes disappointing to kids is that the author purposefully does not want a happy ending at the end of the books, and so that bothers some people. Here's a series that is good to recommend to kids. Perhaps you want to try it out, Charlie Bone and the Castle of Mirrors. This is one of the books that after Harry Potter was published, this book was written, and so it became quite popular. This is another series, Fablehaven by Brandon Mull, that is quite popular among boys in the middle school ages, but probably as young as 4th grade as a read aloud. This is another book by Brandon Mull. It's not a series, but I like this book a lot because these children find a candy shop, and each candy has powers, and so if you eat one candy, it makes you fly. If you eat another candy, it does something else. So it's kind of fun to read. The Boxcar Children is always a good thing to have around a classroom library or at home. They're quite easy to read, and it's a series that gets 3rd and 4th and 5th graders hooked on reading, and they feel really successful with those books. We've already talked about Nancy Drew in the past, but it is a series along with the Hardy Boys that are really popular still. They have a new version that looks like this, so it's a little bit of a younger audience, and there's also graphic novels that you can get about Nancy Drew. So that's a series that continues through the ages. Here's the Hardy Boys. I haven't seen a newer Hardy Boys version. BFG is a class set I usually have around, and as you know, the movie's coming out this summer, so it's going to be a book that teachers are going to go back and get copies of. Here is another book series, Captain Underpants, that is controversial a lot in the literary community, but kids kind of like it. It's got, if you have boys, then usually you have a couple books like this that are around. Not to stereotype, but usually girls don't read this book. There are some girl books out there that usually boys don't read, and there's this new princess children's lit genre going on about princess schools and princess things and training princesses. So here's one of them about fairy tales that's quite popular. This is a new one I saw at the bookstore that I liked, My Life as a Gamer. And it's got some mixture of illustration and text inside that's really interesting. This is a more current book. This is not a current book, but this idea of keeping up with technology. This whole book, TTFN, is written all in text messaging language. And this was actually published a while ago. Here's the sequels to it. And they're really fun to have around in a classroom library. These were in the children's book section at the bookstore. So again, written all in text messaging. These are quite popular nowadays, Smile and Sisters, and so there'll be more in this series, but written for girls by Raina Telgemeier. Babysitter's Club still around as a series that's quite popular. Dork Diaries is one series of books I always have a bunch of copies of. Inside is kind of a variety of text and also comic book captions, and so even readers who are struggling can feel successful reading a chapter book with this one. The Mysterious Benedict Society has gotten a lot of praise lately. I actually haven't read this, but it's on my list to read. This is a series that's really popular nowadays, Spy School by Stuart Gibbs. It's got a few different sequels. This is one of the sequels, Spy Camp and Evil Spy School. These are the same author, Stuart Gibbs, but he started a new series called Space Case, and then the sequel is Spaced Out. And so they're highly popular nowadays. You'll see these at the bookstores right now. One book series that I've really liked with my own children is The Kingdom Keepers. I'm kind of wondering if they got permission or some sort of deal with Disney, because each book is about Disneyland and children who somehow mysteriously get transported to Disneyland after it closes, and there's monsters and villains and mysteries that have to be solved in the Disneyland park. And so there's usually a map and also just different things about Disneyland in the books. There's many different books in this series, but they're really fun to read if you've been to Disneyland. Here's a series, Mr. Lemoncello's Library, that's gotten a lot of literary merit in the different communities. Like the librarians really love this one. The Candy Makers is a new one that I haven't read, but it's on my list to read with my kids. Back to the fairy tales. It's really popular now to have a retelling of fairy tales. So this one is called Red. I think I already had that on there. So if you have reluctant readers or kids who are having a hard time learning how to read, but they are at the age where they don't want to be reading baby picture books all the time, here's a few great ones that help them transition into building up their reading stamina. So the Big Nate books have a variety of comic and text inside, and they're really fast reads. These ones are very popular, even made into movies. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and inside would have text and comic book type writing. My kids have that whole set. Wonderstruck, and also The Invention of Hugo Cabret. Any book by Brian Selznick is really, really fun. First of all, they're huge, so a reader carrying them around feels like they're very smart, but a lot of them are illustrations mixed with text, and his illustrations have been noteworthy. He won the Newbery. In fact, this is the first, it's the first novel to ever win the Caldecott. So some pages are only pictures. He usually uses pencil, and then there's pages with text. But the illustrations really push the storyline along, so they're really fun to read and see how his illustrations set the pace. Here's a mystery that's quite popular now, and you'll find a variety of follow-ups in the series. It's called the 39 Story Treehouse, and here's what it looks like inside, variety of text and pictures. And here's a follow-up, the 26 Story Treehouse, text and pictures. Here's a popular new one from Beverly Cleary. Actually, this is, I think, an example of a biography written for children, so it's all about her story as she was a girl. Here's some other ones you'd see lately at the bookstore that's winning a lot of current awards. Here's one that's won awards the last few years. And finally, this author, Laurie Halse Anderson, sometimes she's known as a young adult and sometimes she's known as a children's book, but here's her latest book that's getting a lot of attention. So, a lot of book recommendations. Hopefully you'll get some ideas for your free choice, and don't be afraid to choose some of these chapter books for your reading list, because it really will give you an idea of what those older elementary kids will be familiar with, will need to read, and also what they'll like.